computer. There we go.
Got it. We're being recorded. Good morning, everybody. My name is Hi. So my name is Christine Wright, and I believe my co-presenter here is Paula. And Paula, you want me to go first, or do you?
What I would like to do is I would like to apologize for not being able to have people see me, because I'm going to be gesticulating wildly, and I'll probably have all kinds of visual aids that you're going to miss. Just pretend that I'm really dynamic. I think it's probably better that I go first, Christine, because your stuff is going to be way more interesting than my stuff. I get the dry part and you get the pretty part. So let's put age before beauty. I'll go first today. How's that?
Oh, wow. It's getting deep in here. Before beauty. Geez, I wouldn't have said that, but okay, we'll go with it. I'm totally cool. It does not matter to me what our order of operations are. So take it away, Paula.
Well, the first thing I need to do is I need to be able to share my PowerPoint. And what do I need to do to give you that on the screen?
Okay, go down to share screen.
I see that.
And choose the window that your PowerPoint is in.
Okay, so share. Do I click share screen first?
Yes, click share screen.
Okay.
And then you should get a choice of windows.
Oh, there we go. Look at that. Oh my goodness. Far out. Let me just click this so I have it displayed right. One page at a time. All right. Share.
Okay, we're not seeing it yet. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, did I mention that the new computer has a touch screen that I detest? Because when your hands get old, you know that touch screens don't work as well because your fingers dry out. So yeah. Okay. How many of you, and I wish we were all in the same room because we're all vaccinated and everything's cool. How many of you are confident in charging the prices that you have on your work? How many of you are happy with the prices that you're charging? Feel real good. Think you're
mostly.
That's good. That's good. You can drink coffee and work crossword puzzles while I talk. I think the most important thing to remember about this is that I'm a buyer of art more than I am a seller of art. So I'm talking to you from the side of the person who would just love to haggle and get you to give me your stuff at lower prices. And I will tell you that when I was the vice president of standards, I wanted to purchase a piece that someone had brought to be juried. So after the jury session was over, and I asked the person how much for this piece, and they went, $175. And I said, you want to try that again, sweetie? They went, $175. And I said, how about $225? And as I'm saying it, I'm thinking, you're an idiot, Lewis, but it was worth $225. She's gone on to have major successes, and she would have charged anybody else on the street $225, but she was about to give me a deal. Not a good thing. Same thing happened a couple of sessions later. I wanted to buy something after the session was over, and the person said, well, it's usually, but I'll sell it to you for. And I said, no, I'm not your sister. I'm not your mother. You know, so that's one thing that I want you guys to understand is like, I love a deal, but not when it comes to handmade. So when it comes to handmade, that's the first thing that we need to realize is that when somebody asks us how much something is, it's not an offensive gambit. It's just how much. It's not why in the hell is it how much, or how much will you give me off? It's just how much. So that's a really important thing to consider. Okay, let me find my buttons and I'll be happy. How do I scroll? Give me scroll down.
Spacebar works.
Does? There it goes. Okay. You may have heard there are lots of pricing strategies, and I've listed a few for you from back in the day whenever I was a marketing major in college, and they all have their pluses and their minuses. But None of them are for us. Now, really what pricing boils down to is it's a lot like dieting. There are so many fads and formulas out there from which to choose. If you want to, like 90% of us right now post-COVID, want to lose weight, there's all kinds of recipes for you to do that. But just like pricing your work, what it boils down to is math. Total input versus total output. When you do it with weight loss, it's food in plus exercise out equals weight. When it comes to your work, your artist's input in, the work sold comes down to profit. That's as plain and simple as it is. No magic. Our plan is going to be bottom-up pricing. No. Might do this after we're done, but not for now. We're not doing that kind of bottoms up. First thing we want to talk about in making your work is how much time does it take to make your product? There are a lot of things that people don't consider when they're making this time consideration. Obviously, there's the fabrication time. The time that you're at your bench or at your easel, you count that. But design time, the time that you're awake at 2 o'clock in the morning because you can't get some configuration out of your brain, that's time you're working. The time it takes for you to source your materials. And for some folks, I would imagine with the things sitting off the docks and not being able to come in, you might have some trouble finding things that you usually find. Certain colors of paint may be more difficult to get to. All kinds of things that affect that. Sourcing the best materials from and buyer and people who get out of business and that kind of stuff. So that takes your time. Bookkeeping. Oh, we all love bookkeeping, don't we? Oh, yeah, yeah. Everybody should have a mathematician sister like I do. Life would be so much easier for you. But that counts toward making your product. That's making your business run. And inspiration time. So if you go for a walk in the woods, or if you go visit a museum, or all of that stuff, you have to count in. One of my favorite comebacks was a guy who made mobiles, beautiful mobiles, but he could whip them out like nothing. And somebody said, how long does it take you to make that? And he said, well, let's see. He said, I went to school for 12 years, and then I was in college for 4 years, and then I was in graduate school for 2 years, and then I had 27 years experience in 15 minutes. And you have all of that stuff does count, because if you say, Christine, you say, I can make a little brooch in 40 hours. And I say, well, I got 40 hours. My 40 hours ain't your 40 hours. So those are things that are really important. And I think a lot of the time, because a lot of us do a lot of things that other people don't do, we just take for granted that everybody can do them, and they can't. So we tend to devalue all of that experience that brought us to where we are. So make sure that you don't shortchange that. What are your materials costs? Not just the stuff you put in the piece, but the stuff that you have to support it. When you package it, if you're gonna mail something, if you're going to take it to a shop, all of those things go into the materials for the actual piece. Every little sweet little bag that you put a piece of jewelry in, every piece of tissue paper that you wrap a turned wood piece in, all of that is in your materials cost. And the percentage that galleries charge, I think, goes in with your materials, because that's a piece that's tied to the individual piece. Okay. If anybody has any questions or disagrees with me, yell at me. I'm good with it. Then your overhead costs. Whether you take these on your taxes or not is not part of this discussion. This discussion is for you to understand what you are really giving up, because percentage by square footage of your home that you use solely for your work. You may not want to take that on your income tax, because you may not be in a position where that will make a difference there. For some reason, a lot of people don't want to worry with that. But if I take up a 12 by 20 space in my basement for my studio, and there's nothing in there but my studio, that means there's an opportunity cost for that space that my husband can't put a pool table, a ping pong table, and a wet bar. So there is that cost. Whether we apply it to taxes is not important. So the percentage by square footage of your house, and then just figure out how much it costs. My average heating bill per year is X. And so my overhead cost for my studio is whatever percentage times X. Your membership dues to wonderful places like the Pennsylvania Guild of Craftsmen, which I think is a bargain. And if you belong to the ACC, if you belong to a Woodturner Society, if you belong to SNAG, all of that stuff, you need to count in your overhead costs. A lot of this is paper and not cash out. But again, you have to run your business like a business. So count all this stuff up. Make sure you know. Show application fees, not actual show fees, but show application fees are things that some people lose in their bookkeeping. Travel, lodging, food. Just a little aside, I have to laugh at folks who go, oh, I would never put my work in a gallery because they take 40% and I can just get 100% of the show. Figure out how much it costs to do that weekend, not the least of which is you're spending 40 hours from setup to teardown where you are not in your studio, not making things. So that's another reason why it's really important that we look at all of these areas where it costs us to do what we do so we can make smart decisions, not just snap decisions. Your display.
Well, can I interject quick?
Sure.
This whole slide is why everyone should have an accountant.
Mhm.
Because you're a business. If you're selling your work, you're a business, whether you like to think of yourself as one or not. And I can tell you for the whole square footage thing, because that calculation is very tricky. What our accountant does is our accountant has us on a personal level charge our business rent for the space that it uses. So instead of taking our home, which is also our home office, as a like figuring out the square footage thing,
Mhm.
she has, our business pays us X amount in rent, and that's how she does the taxes. So I don't recommend trying it on your own, but
Not for
absolutely
tax
get an accountant.
purposes, no.
Yeah, absolutely get an accountant for this whole slide.
Yeah,
Just this slide alone is justification for an accountant.
Yeah, if you're going to take tax deductions for things, you need to, yeah, that's very, very important. You want to make sure that you're right on the taxes. And make sure you have an accountant who is not just doing taxes for H&R old people, Yes, Eileen.
Yeah, I was just going to add though, for people that are still getting small potatoes like me,
Mhm.
I have an accountant, but I don't, mine is still considered sort of half hobby, half business. I think it's
Sure.
So I'm not at that level where I would probably do that.
Again, the important thing to understand here, to take away from this, is whether you are doing this for tax purposes or not right now is immaterial to this part of the discussion, because what we want to get to is we're going to pretend that it's like we're a little indie garage band and we're just starting out, and lo and behold, 2 years later we're Debbie, Harry, and Blondie, and we're apologizing because we become such great commercial successes. And they didn't expect they were going to do that, but people liked them and they did it. So we want to make sure that we have the groundwork laid, because your work, whether you're selling it to 6 people or 6,000 people, your work is of certain value, and you need to make sure that you start out with that early on, so you don't, it's like women are making 77% of what men make because women started out lower in business than men did, and we're hurrying to catch up. So we don't want anybody who's just starting out or going from hobby to dabbling in retail or wholesale. We don't want you to set yourself up 2 steps behind. That's important. But yeah, I understand what you're saying, Eileen. I am definitely a hobbyist. So that's a good point.
Could we get a copy of this slide?
You can have a copy of the entire presentation. I sent it to Toby and he can send it out to you whenever we're through with this. Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm more than happy to let you have my stuff.
I will do that.
Can I back you up once?
Yeah.
This is on one of your earlier slides. So question, what if you have a very good friend that buys a lot of stuff? Do you give them a discount because they're buying a lot of stuff from you? Or
we'll get to that in a couple of slides.
Oh, okay.
We'll get to that later. Right now, we're talking about what it costs for you to make what you got. Later on, we'll talk about what you got to do to get people to give you their money. But
Yeah.
that's a very important question. So yes, and
Sorry, Paula.
that's okay.
I've been doing my taxes forever because I
Mhm.
can bookkeep, so that's really
That's-
good. I have a lot more in overhead, and one of my biggest is photography. Because
Yes, that's your advertising expenses. Yes, things that you do to promote yourself. Yes.
right, and all the website stuff.
Yep. Mhm.
And the other things that I have are books and magazines, because I do buy some books on occasion and I subscribe to some magazines, so that's missing. And then continuing education.
Yep.
You take a workshop to refine some skills, so that's also goes on
This
to
is
the.
terrific. This is why I wish we were all in a room together, because there's so much energy that, and this is another reason why I think that our membership in the PGC is such a bargain. I always get, and another reason why you should volunteer, because I always get so much out of it. Somebody said, oh, you're doing a thing for the guild. You're always doing something for the guild. And it's like, I always get more than I give. So this is great. This is fabulous. If you want to annotate your copy whenever you get it and fire me a note, I can't be all inclusive, but I do like those that you have mentioned. So if you would just fire that off to me, then I can add it, because that's good.
There's a couple of others, and that has to do with tools and tool maintenance. I mean, I have some pretty heavy duty tools as a jeweler, and that sometimes has to go down on my overhead costs.
Yes.
Right.
Very good, very good. And the advertising things, that's another thing that people tend to undercount. It's like, I'm on Facebook a lot, and 99% of what I'm doing on Facebook is sharing stuff by members of the PGC or other artists that I collect. I do it because I'm not rich, so I can't be somebody's benefactor, but I can help them by sharing their work. And I do that now because I do it as a collector. But if you go on and do it as someone who is selling your work actively, part of that is there should be, and I hate that somebody has co-opted the word, made it ugly, there should be a quid pro quo. You know, when Toby goes and shares something about Wheel of Light Studio, Robin is out there sharing Toby's work. That's not it, and it's not because it's disingenuous, it's because it's the right thing to do. So if you're on Facebook stirring up, rousing your group of people, then that's part of your time. So again, just make sure that you're not leaking things out that are not obvious to you. That's the main thing I want to get across to you here, is don't undercount things. Okay, so where are we now? We have labor, we have materials, and we have overhead. And that equals not even close to minimum price. Not even close. Some people get to that point and go, well, I know how much my stuff costs to make it. And then they slap the prices on it. And it's like, well, that's not exactly the whole story. So let's go on and see what else is involved. Yeah, there's always more with me, you know. Who are your competitors? This is probably one of the absolute most critical things to pricing successfully after you've figured out how not to give your stuff away and charge less for it than it's actually costing you to make. Your competitors are obviously people who work in the same medium, people who have the same purpose of product. Now, what I mean by that is, for example, I do wall work. I do enamel, copper, collage. So I'm not competing with other enamelists who do cloisonné jewelry. I'm competing with painters and fiber artists who do tapestry and wall work. So I'm competing for that square footage on the wall. Toby may be competing with people who throw pots. Eileen and Christine, you guys who make jewelry, man, there's just all kinds of stuff. And Christine, with some of your larger pieces, you're competing with people like Maureen Camrick, who make things that wrap around your neck like shawls. So these are very important considerations, is what else, not just what in my medium, but what else are people being offered that fulfill that same spot in their house or on their person. And also you want to look at the customer demographic. If you're sharing a customer demographic, because people have a finite amount of extra spendable, bendable. So if you are competing for a niche market of, say, women between the ages of 35 and 49 who are still in the workforce, but are at a level where they have enough money that they can buy nicer clothing, nicer jewelry, nicer accessories, they're also looking for things for their kids for school. They're also looking for experience things. So you need to just say, what else is my demographic spending their money on that they could be spending it with me? And how do I either broaden my customer demographic so I get more people who have a little bit of money, or how do I hone in on the things that make my demographic and leverage those? Don't have the answers because that's not what I'm talking about, but that's what you need to figure out. So, and we can all get together. Yes.
I have a couple of questions, but I didn't know if you wanted us to wait for the end of your presentation to ask.
No, just jump in.
Okay, I do pastels, and I've been in a couple of shows, like at the Wayne Art Center, and I look at, you know, what people price their work for about the same size, you know, and the same medium, and it's really hard for me to, you know, okay, the fine arts, I can't explain it. Okay, so in the studio, something that might be the medium price for many works is like over $300, $400, $500.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And but I'm going to the arts and crafts fair like next weekend, and it's a different you know, I have price points in my work because I have different sizes, but it's a different, how do you put it? Well, you know, it's not the same medium. So, you know, how do I decide? I was going to price my works lower than what they priced them in this in the gallery.
No. We'll talk about that in a couple of slides too.
Okay, that's the complicated piece of it for me. And I was pricing per square inch, basing it on that formula.
How do you know what square inch is right? How do you know what square inch doesn't mean anything unless you know how much time, effort, money, blood, sweat, tears, and overhead you're putting into it? Square inch is somebody else's. Don't do that. Don't trust somebody else to tell you what your work is worth. Because I'm working, and my work competes with fine art also. So I understand what you're saying. I do. So yeah, we'll talk more about that. And if you ever want to talk to me, just brainstorm with something, send me an email with your phone number and a time to call you, and I'll call you and we can chat. You know, I'm
great.
Happy to do that. I belong to the PGC because I love my fellow artists. I truly do. And if I can be of any help, even the fact that if I can be a horrible warning by example, that works for me too. So
do you have is your email and the emails that was sent out, or?
I'm sure, but Toby can give it to you. I'm happy if I'll, yeah, Toby, would you mind putting that in the summary? Just give him my email.
Will do.
That's great. That's
great.
I'd
like to talk before next weekend.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's go on and see what we got. Okay. This is a really important thing. And this leads into what you were just asking about. How does my work compare to my competitors? Okay. Quality of materials is a very important consideration. For example, again, jewelers, there are so many differences in jewelers. Are you working with beads that 99.9% of what you do that adds value to your work is the amount of time and design and precision that you're doing in the fabrication? Are you working, for example, is your competitor, Christine, Michael Alexander, who the cheapest thing in his booth is $8,000 and he works in gold and fine gemstones? Don't think so. Exactly. So that's a really important consideration. It doesn't mean that your work is less valuable than his, but the quality of the materials has to have something to do with that. Has to.
Paula, I'm going to interrupt you here.
Yes, go ahead, honey.
Because in the jewelry industry, pricing is based on something called keystone. And unfortunately, too many craftspeople don't know this, but jeweler's keystone goes like this. You take the cost of your materials, you double it for wholesale, you quadruple it for retail, which does not include diamonds and other very, very precious stones.
Mhm.
So if my materials cost me $50, I should charge $200 for my retail price. This is what levels the playing field for everyone, right?
That's fine, but it
That's
does
the way it's
not
supposed to
work.
be, but that's not the way that most craft things work.
That's not the way it can work. That's not the way it can work when you have jewelers who are working in things like resin and beads and other things that have a very low cost of materials. That's not the way it can work. That's the same way as it can't work in fine art, because it's not all about that. We can have a spirited discussion about this later, but that's not the way things can work in the Pennsylvania Guild of Craftsmen when you have jewelers who are working in very different things. Glass rods for lamp workers don't cost nearly enough for them to just quadruple the price of the glass rod whenever they've made a bead. That you just
And I think,
can't. Fine jewelry,
and-
maybe that's true, but you can't do that with.
and I think that you do, and speaking, I'm, for those of you who don't know, I'm a bead weaver. So I'm one of those people. I work with, relatively inexpensive materials compared to what Julie does, which is she works with fine metals.
Silver, yeah.
So when you talk about jewelry, there are two different worlds that you talk about. There's your traditional materials with gold, silver, gemstones. And then you have the other side of jewelry where I've seen people who make beautiful paper jewelry. So I can't work off of a traditional jeweler's guidebook any more than I could ask Julie to work off of mine, because, whereas my material, some of my pieces will take up to 80 hours to complete versus 40 hours for something, or 20 hours for a more traditional piece, but yet our pricing is about the same, because where my materials quality is much less, my time is way higher. So you have to really judge according to where you're at, and don't look at somebody else too much.
I do agree with Julie's point about fine jewelers, people who are working in precious metals and things that are, things that people used to trade for money while they traded beads for money too. But I think the point of it is that your materials are important in comparing. For example, Christine, I'm sure that you use the best beads that come from Japanese bead makers, and you use glass beads. You're not using plastic perler beads to make.
Oh, absolutely.
So there would be an example of your quality of materials. If somebody is stringing plastic pony beads and they're making the same pattern as Christine is using size 15 glass beads, there's a quality of materials difference there that you need to recognize. Now, it's an extreme one, but that's the point. The quality of technique. If I am buying the most fabulous beads in the world, including if I am buying fine handmade lampwork beads from Eileen, and I'm stringing a blue bead and a red bead and a blue bead and a red bead and a blue bead and a red bead, that does not come up to the level of I am making something with a piece of shibori woven into beads, and it doesn't. So what the difference in technique is. The important and the part about what we're talking about on this slide is not to get you thinking about being better or worse. What it is to get you to think about is, and again, with originality of style, if everybody makes what you make, sorry, that the more distinctive your work, the more money you can charge for it. That's just, if it appeals to your clientele. Generally speaking, rarity means it's worth more to collectors. The point of this is so you are realistic about what you can charge for your work. You need to, if you go in and say, but this person is charging this much for it, why can't I? Well, then you need to look at this slide and be honest with yourself. The worst thing anybody can do is underprice themselves, because you cannot come back from that nearly as easily as if you put a big price on something and you go, well, that didn't work. Then you come back and you look and go, well, was it my quality of materials? Was it my quality of technique? Was my style not good? Was I not getting it in front of the right eyeballs? Those are important things. So let's move on. And here we go to, will someone find in my work something meaningful for them? What is it about what you do that makes someone want to buy your stuff rather than someone else who makes stuff like you make? How many potters do you know? I mean, I think I could probably name 100 off the top of my head without breaking a sweat that I know. Not just that I know their names, but that I know. Why is it that I collect pottery made by one person? I have some pieces from other people, but my everyday coffee mugs are always Christy Knox pottery. What is it about her work? There are other potters who use similar colors. There are other potters who use similar shapes. The story of her work just connects. She connects with me. The whole thing, there's just, when I hold my coffee mug in the morning, I feel like I'm having coffee with her, and that's a good thing. So the story of your work, it's like, if I'm wearing a piece of silver jewelry that has hollow form in it, I feel very sophisticated, because that jeweler I know down in my corner of my screen is a very sophisticated person, and I feel very elegant in that. If I have, when I gave my sister a piece of Toby's turned wood, I knew that she would feel all of the care that Toby put into it, and she would appreciate that he had worked all of his life in the bowels of the corporate beast and was now making beauty. So those are important things. So you need to make sure that what you do is imbued with who you are. And how does your work enrich the life of your customer? When somebody puts on a beautiful bead woven scarf to go out for an elegant dinner with their husband of 25 years, they feel more special because they're wearing something that's unique. It's just for them. Those are important things. Or does it enrich the life of your customer because they can come in and buy 50 plant stakes with cute little mushrooms on top of them and give them to everybody they know in December, and they can have a lovely gift to give. It makes them feel better. So you find whatever ways. These are like just little piddly things that I'm talking about here, but you know in your heart what makes your work special. And if you can't articulate that, you need to sit down with a piece of paper and a pencil and write things down about it until something comes to you. That's another thing. If you would like to have any help with writing an artist's statement, I mean, I can write you one that is a traditional quote unquote artist statement, but if you need somebody to write your matchbook story or your back of the business card story, contact me. I'll be happy to try to help you in any way I can. And it's like, my advice is free. It's not worthless, but it is free. So I'm underpricing myself here. No, I just would be happy to, really. So here's the other thing. We talked about all these other costs. You deserve to make a little money. Don't forget that you deserve to make a little money or a lot of money. So figure out that too. In pricing, there are several things that are critical. The first thing is, in being consistent, is retail price is retail price, period. Don't change your price for galleries versus shows. You can't, the absolute least professional thing you can do is undercut one of your galleries. It's like I've seen people who have notices in their booths at shows that say, this is the show price. You know what? I can't buy from those people because those people are being dishonest with their galleries. And if you're being dishonest with your galleries, then I can't have your work and feel good about it because I don't like you as an artist. And I think people are, you know, that's an important thing. And do you want people who want to deal wearing your work, or do you want people who love your work and want to have it, carrying it or drinking out of it or looking at it every morning when they get out of bed? You know, this just your considerations, but you should always respect the business people that you are in the network with. So just don't do that. Prices across your business should make sense, from the lowest price item to the highest price item and across lines. It's like if you have the quote unquote bread and butter piece, that's fine, but make sure that your bread and butter piece isn't a tchotchke and your top of the line piece is not something that belongs in Louvre. You know, you have to, it has to be reasonable. You want to make sure that people, if somebody buys one of your little turned Christmas trees, Toby, because that's all they can afford right now, but they really want a big piece of Toby's work, they should feel like that little Christmas tree is truly a work that's Toby Bowder. You can't make it too, it just can't be inconsistent. I don't know how else to say that. And from line to line, what do we mean by that? If you, Eileen has several lines of work. She does the plant steaks, she does the butter and dip spreaders and the salad, she does the serving pieces, she does some individual beads and jewelry. Across from one thing to another, it's like if you have a cheese knife that has 4 beads on it, it should make sense that that cheese knife costs something relatively like you would expect something that has 4 beads on it from you. Now, people will understand that there's a cost of the materials that are different, but they can't swing wildly, because then what people will see if your pricing is very, very, very all over the place is that this person doesn't know what the hell their stuff's worth. Why should I buy it? So
I can absolutely agree with that, because at one point because I realized that my prices were far too low at one point. And so I started slowly raising them. And what I found was that my prices within their own context were completely inconsistent. So I sat down and I went through every piece of inventory that I had. And it took forever. And I'm really glad that I did it, because my sales improved remarkably after I sat down and I went across the board and priced things consistently, and it just made all the difference.
I'm glad to hear that.
I'd like to add something, actually.
Yeah.
I know that I've heard some common wisdom that you do shows, you should have some really inexpensive pieces, you know, below $100. And I can't do that. My average is $350, and it just is not a good look for me to have $50 earrings that I've just wired up. It doesn't look.
No.
It's just not.
Don't dumb your work down. Do not dumb your work down. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a case of make sure that where you are exhibiting your work works for the work you do.
Right.
I had no bread and butter pieces whenever I was, you know, it's like my work's in galleries now. I'm in 2 galleries. I should get in a couple of more, but I don't care, because if somebody looks at a piece of at a $400 wall hanging, they may need to look at it 2 or 3 times. They may need to take it home and hang it on the wall and bring it back to the gallery and say, I'd like to have something in a different. I know that about my work. So it's stupid for me to go. It's like Linda Billett's glass work. Linda Billett used to do shows. Linda Billett makes fused glass and mosaic glass, and her work starts at probably $3,000. She did the show at Downtown Disney and didn't have a good show. I mean, that was but she does sell work on commission basis, and she knows how, and not shows don't work for everybody. Galleries don't work for everybody. Pennsylvania fine craft fairs work for some people, and the local church bazaar works for other people. You have to know, that's a case of knowing what eyeballs need to see your work. And that's really important. And that's a whole nother discussion, but that's a very important point. And I am so glad that you said you do not dumb down your work for the quote unquote bread and butter pieces. Not everybody can afford your work. That's just the way it goes. You know, a lot of artists can't afford their own work.
That's true.
It is, yeah. So, and now we'll talk about sales. As a rule, don't make a practice of running sales or lowering your prices. One thing you will do if you run sales is you will generate an entire subclass of collectors who will just wait for the sale. You know, they always run a sale, you know, in January. So I'll just wait till January and, you know, don't do that.
We're not cheats.
That, that's exactly right. You are right. And lowering your prices, it's, if you've done all the things before that you're supposed to be doing to get to your price, why are you going to lower it? If you're valuing yourself properly, you're honestly valuing your work, your time, your overhead, why are you going to lower your price? Now, the exception to that rule, because there's always, you know, what Captain Barbosa, they're more like guidelines. But anyway, what we need to remember is that you can initiate that. For example, my darling Christy Knox Pottery, who I will tell you that she made my daughter's last dress. She made the urn for my daughter's ashes. And so she's a very important person to me. I went to her booth a couple of years ago and I said, I cannot believe I broke my coffee mug, my favorite one. Like I have 6, but I broke my favorite one. I need another one. And she wrapped it up and handed it to me. And I got my checkbook out and she said, oh, no, 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 no. You've spent way too much. This is my gift. And I was dumbfounded and it was lovely. And it was, you know, it was a mug. How much did it cost her in clay and firing time? It was a mug. It probably didn't cost her doodly, but it was a very important thing. But I would never in my wildest dreams ask her for a discount, even though I had spent lots of money. I would never do that because because I know how she values her work. I would never ask anybody who is a member of the guild for a discount. I would never do that. And I bet none of you would. So why would you entertain that from someone else? Your job is to explain to people why they're wrong and you're right. You have to be nicer about it than that. But you know, sometimes you can just, you know, if you get enough of it, you just have to say, look, I'm sorry that your wallet isn't as big as your eyeballs, but that's okay, you know. But don't lower your prices. If you have customers who are great customers, one way of doing this that is acceptable is to send out to, like, if you have 10 people who are your best collectors, send out a message every now and then and go, thank you so much for being such a good customer. Here's a 10% off coupon for you to use at my next, wherever you're going to be. 9 times out of 10, when you send a coupon to somebody, they either can't make it to where the coupon's good for, or they go and they weren't going to go and they spend money and they bring their friends. And so those kinds of things that's not running a sale. That's you're making that decision. And the other time it would be okay to do that is if you are completely changing lines. There is nothing wrong with saying, this is my dated material. It's just as good. It's just as great. And you don't say it that way. You say, hey, get this before it's gone, because I'm coming out with a new line. And so there are times whenever it's appropriate, but in general, if somebody comes up and says, can I have a discount? Say, no. That, you know, you say it politely, but the answer is no. Why do you deserve a discount? You know, if you run that in your mind, imagine that. You go to the doctor, you don't say, hey, can I have a discount? You know, the guy or the woman has studied for years and years and years and years and spent sleepless nights and worried and fretted. And let me tell you, so have you. I know that. So just remember that. Now, here's the other side of that. I love this quote. You should never be embarrassed if you can make your work quickly and sell it at high prices. Rather than a stigma, it's a blessing. Understandably, you may not advertise time spent creating the piece, but you shouldn't undervalue your work because you created high quality work in an efficient manner either. This goes to people who can streamline. If you can do that, if you can develop a technique that enables you, like my mobile friend who can make them in 15 minutes now, let me tell you, it took him a lot of years of practice to be able to do that. It doesn't take very long for a classical pianist to play a Beethoven sonata, but you don't pay him by the minute because you go broke because you'd start when he was 3. So this is the other side of that coin. Make sure you add up every hour, but as you get better at what you do and it takes you less time, that doesn't mean that it's worth less because it's a cumulative thing. This to me is the most important thing for everybody who sells fine craft. Unless you're confident in your work and feel good about putting a respectable price on it, do not offer it for sale. Do not. If you don't care whether you make money, you need to respect your fellow artisans. They're out there trying to make a living. And if you lower your price and sell below market, you're hurting them. And that's irresponsible and unkind. And just as surely as Napster killed music, this will kill fine art and fine craft if we don't behave respectfully toward others. I don't care whether I make money on my work. I don't do shows. I don't sell it cheap. I put it in the galleries, and if it sells, it sells. And if I want to give a piece away to someone, I will gift it, but I will never set up a booth and have a fire sale. I'm not going to do that. No one should do that. So and I've heard this from so many people, well, I just do it for fun. And it's like, well, then keep it in your house or throw it in the trash, but don't set up at a show next to somebody who is trying to make their mortgage payment. So I don't think anybody on this call would do that, but make sure that if you hear that from somebody's mouth, that you tell them that they are taking somebody else's dinner from them. And now that you've done all this good stuff, what do you do when the market speaks? If you're not selling enough, Christine said it earlier, raise your prices. If you price too low, people are going to be suspicious of your work. It's like, oh my goodness, that can't have, they had to spend hours doing that, or if they didn't spend hours doing that, it must have come from China. You can't devalue your work. If you devalue your work by your price tag, you're asking for the public to believe you because you're the expert on it. So don't underprice. When I raised my prices, I sold more. Now you can't be crazy about it, but you do have to make sure, and jewelers, again, prestige pricing is so important. It's so important. And you just have to say, I want to make more money, so I'm going to raise my prices and see what happens. And closing down that price differential. I used to have things in my booth that were $225 and $215 and $245 and $305 and $310. And it's like, no, just pick a $125, a $200, a $250, get a couple things. But if in doubt, raise your prices. If you have honestly done the other stuff, if you have honestly valued what your materials and your level of skill and your unique voice, then try raising your prices. If you're running out of inventory, oh my God, people go, I can't make enough fast enough. It's raise your prices. Raise your prices. How stupid is that? It's raise your prices. I mean, I watched my friend Diane Troutman, who is a maker of fine art collectible Victorian Santas. And she never could make enough to satisfy her collectors. And her prices keep going up, going up, going up. She has a wholesale guy in California who buys 5 Santas from her a year. And I'm pretty sure the cheapest one he buys is 500 wholesale. And it's a standing order. And because it's a unique product, it's a handcrafted product. And to me, it has no intrinsic value at all. Because I don't celebrate Christmas. I'm not a big fan of Victorian stuff, blah, blah, blah. But I get it. I get it because I see the way it's marketed. And she said to me a couple of years ago, I'm gonna have to raise my prices because I can't keep up. And when you're raising your prices of something that sits on a shelf for a holiday season and costs $4 digits to the left of the decimal place, you know you got something going on. So find that for yourself too. If you're running out of inventory, please raise prices. So I love this quote too. This is a kinder quote from something that I always tell people. They go, why do you want so much money for it? And I say, because that's how much I like it. And for me to give it to you, you have to give me that much money in return. This is, if you like what I do, this is what I charge. If you don't wish to pay it, you don't have to buy it. Also love a comment from a former YBC member, Den Daggs, who used to say when people would go, oh, that's a lot of money, she'd say, my work isn't for everyone. So, and that's an appropriate and kind thing to say. If you have doubts, review the pricing strategy. Make sure that you've been honest with all the things that we talked about. Ask a respected colleague, am I too high? Am I too low? What am I missing? Is my work not as great as I think it is? Most of us have the other problem and think their work is not as great as it really is. And get advice from a collector friend. If you have someone who you know who buys a lot of art, who is influential, who maybe they're in the lively arts. Maybe it's someone who's a symphony backer or a ballet person. Talk to them. Get advice from them. Sometimes you just need somebody to say, yeah, it's okay, you should do this. Don't ever sell yourself or your work short. That's just the last thing we need to do. And another reason why we need to be members of the PGC is so we can help each other. A rising tide does lift all boats whenever it comes to fine craft and home and work and studio. We need to make sure that we help each other. You are worth it. And I appreciate so much being able to talk to you. And I really will be glad whenever we can all get together in a room and talk together real soon. Thank you so much for your time. And again, just email me and I'll be happy to talk to you. Thank you so much. And I'm so looking forward to Christine.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Paula. That was great.
Thank you, Paul. It was wonderful.
Oh, you're so welcome. Now, if I can figure out, stop share.
Always learn something new.
Really, really worthwhile for me.
I think pricing is one of the #1 hardest things to figure out.
I have a one comment or question. Sometimes I'll make a bowl and I'll make another one. The one bowl looks normal. It's like, you know, there's a bowl. The other one, because of the figure or maybe the color that I added, but they both have the same amount of my expense, time and materials and costs, but I'll price one more because it just shouts at you that this is a beautiful piece.
I know they're all the ones Toby prices higher, the ones I was going, oh, I wish I could have that one. Yes, and that comes down to it's unique. There's something about the wood that's different. And the quality of the color that you apply, that has to do with your command of the material and your expertise. So that's why you're doing that. And that's right. Yeah, it makes sense.
So you're adding the price of your creativity to the
yes,
piece.
yes, absolutely. Miss Muse is an expensive one to feed. So you need to make sure that you add her costs in.
Can you put your email in the chat?
I don't think I can, but I can give it to you right now. It's very simple. My email is scorched, SCORCHED -eyebrow @hotmail.com. I'm an enamelist. There's truth in advertising.
Oh, I love it. Scorched eyebrow.
Yeah,
I can relate.
I'm sure you can, Julie.
I admire anybody who can play with fire for a living. I think that's awesome.
Well, it's the kiln in and out 1500 degrees, looking right at it. I come upstairs, I looked like W.C. Fields a few times too many. So I finally did break down in my old age and buy a heat shield, but there were a couple of minutes there where,
Well, I have an old Stuart clay enameling kiln. Old. I mean, it must be about 75 years old.
Oh my gosh. I'll tell you, if anybody wants to do enameling, Don't buy any kiln that's not made in Chula Vista, California by Vasella Kiln Company. Those guys are awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
Christine?
All right. I guess it's up to me now. So yeah, so this is, all right, hold on. I call it, whenever you're doing this stuff, you always have to kind of take a moment and figure out how to share things. There we go. Okay, my turn. So the topic I've been asked to talk about is preparing your photos for juries. If I can just get a baseline, and feel free to shout out or hold something up, I can view if some people on off to the side here, but I may miss a few hands. Who here has relatively new to being juried into craft shows? Okay, I see Donna's hand. Eileen. Okay, so at least a couple people here is relatively new. I know some people here have definitely are involved with getting juried in. There's some stuff I'm sure I'm going to say that you already know, and I apologize for that in advance. But because I really do want to kind of cover a broad experience range. So a little bit about me. My name is Christine Wright. I am a master artisan. I'm a bead weaving artist. I'm also a professional graphic designer, and I am the current president of the Haverford Guild of Craftsmen. So the perspectives I'm bringing into this presentation is basically all three of them. They all apply. I'm always sending out applications myself. I also receive applications because Haverford does put on a couple of shows a year, and I'm a graphic designer, and I get photos all the time from clients that I have to make look good on whatever it is. Everything from photos of jewelry to fishing lures to large men in house dresses. So it's the sort of thing that, yeah, I know a few things about what works in publishing and what doesn't. And one of the things that when you submit your show applications, the hope is I hope they pick me for advertising. So I'm also going to add a little bit of that into this as well. What we're going to cover today is basically what the jurors want to see when looking at photos of your work, what jurors will want to see when looking at your booth photo, because that's also super important, and how to increase your chances of the photo being used from advertising. I am also going to try and go over the basics of do-it-yourself photography and photo retouching, and hopefully we'll have some time for questions. I have a lot of stuff to go through, so if you have a question, write it down. I may answer it later, but if I don't, definitely, ask me at the end of it. I can always go backwards on the slides if I have to. But yeah, and Paula, Paula's a former vice president of standards, so there's no pressure on me whatsoever. So, but if Paula, if you've got something to add, I welcome that as well. So we are going to have an interactive portion. So grab a piece of paper and write on it a check mark, a question mark, and a big old no. Or if you can do this backwards, and so people can see what it is. So, okay. So how are shows juried? That is the first question you have to ask yourself, because believe it or not, there's more than one way to jury a craft show. The gold standard is what's called a blind jury. A blind jury is when the people who are reviewing the work have no idea who you are. All of your personal contact business information is hidden from the jury. And in some cases, they'll take all the photos from a particular category, scramble them, and then when the jurors go through and vote on them, they score those images individually. So if Julie and I are both in the jewelry category, sorry, Julie, I'm going to pick on you for a sec. Let's say we're both in the jewelry category. One of her photos will show up, and one of my photos will show up, somebody else's photo, my second photo, her second photo. So what that does is in some cases, it levels the playing field in terms of scoring, because they don't know who you are. Now, there are other ways of jurying work. Another way is that they will It'll be a committee and you still get scored, but your contact information isn't necessarily hidden. So they'll know that when they're looking at my work, it's work by Christine Wright. And then it goes down from there. Sometimes it's just a small committee. If you've ever heard of people who accept rolling applications, usually it's 1 or 2 people who will review the photos, and it's more of an in or out situation. And then lower down the food chain even further is somebody who is in charge of the show, and they look at the photos and they want to make sure you're handmade only. And that's another in or out, but you're not necessarily scored. We're mostly going to be looking, and my advice is always apply for a show as though it were a blind jury, which is the hardest to get through. If you aim for the top there, chances are pretty good you're going to have a much better presentation than if you assume that it's going to be somebody who's just going to say in or out. So what do they want to see when they're looking at your work? First place to start is your background. This is the easiest problem to fix. Okay, so if you have a problem with your backgrounds, this is the simplest one to do, and yet this is the one that most people screw up on, myself included. When I first started applying to shows, I had this idea that I was going to make my backgrounds look like this, and I learned that was a really bad idea. So, if you're already doing this, don't feel bad. And by the way, most of the images you're going to see are not photos that I've received for the application process. Most of them are similar to images I've received on the application process. I don't want to call anyone out, so I'm pretty sure nobody's going to see anything they recognize here. So I just wanted to put that out there. So if your work is 3-dimensional, you have a different challenge than people who have 2-dimensional work. What's not okay? You don't want heavy textures. No bark, no wrinkly fabric, no leaves, no wooden fences, driveways, pavement, sand, none of that. You don't want to stage your photo as though it's in a scene or in situ. You don't want that at all. If you're a jewelry artist, do not take a picture of a pair of earrings as a close-up hanging on somebody's ear. Nobody wants to see the inside of somebody else's ear. They only want to see the earring. So here's a photo. It's a lovely sweater hanging on a wooden fence. That doesn't work. Here's another photo. It's in situ. It's a lovely, this would actually make a decent catalog cover, but as a photo for jurying work, none of these are going to work because you're not really able to focus on the work because there's so much going on around it. A lot of times jurors have a lot of photos to get through. They don't have time to look at a photo and try and figure out exactly what it is that, which part of this did you make? What is okay? Well, plain white, black, neutral colors. That's it. Gradients are fine. You can go from dark to light. In fact, depending on their work, that might actually be a better option. It all depends on what it is that what you're presenting. Sometimes adding a soft shadow underneath the work is perfectly fine. What that does is that it can ground something, especially for things like earrings. It's kind of tough because it can look weird floating, but at the same time, it's a call that you have to make, but it's still acceptable. When you look at these photos, all you're looking at is the work. You're not looking at anything else. You're not looking at the background or trying to figure out exactly what it is that the person is being judged on. All right, 2-dimensional folks, I haven't forgotten you. What's good for you? Well, unless the application otherwise specifies, all they want to see is your art. So crop to the edge. An exception to this is sometimes they say must be in a square format. If you have a rectangular piece in a square format, the solution to that is black bars. You just put black bars to make it square, but you don't distort the artwork itself. You just go edge to edge to the art. Don't include a frame or a mat unless it is an integral part of your work. So if the frame or the mat is absolutely key, then you can include it, but I wouldn't recommend it. And if your art is two-dimensional, your photo should be two-dimensional. This is not okay. All right. This breaks the in situ rule. Look, it's a beautiful piece of work and it's above a mantelpiece. You're not really, the only thing that should be in the image is the image. This, and I think this guy is going to go somewhere someday. This is really more what you're looking at. It's edge to edge artwork. There's nothing else there. You don't need it. So yeah, so that's basically for two-dimensional, your photos should just be just the art. Quick tip, if your work is small enough and you're not comfortable with a camera, get yourself a scanner. You can scan paintings. You just have to lift the scanner top up a little bit and then lay it down flat. And most scanner tops will do that. They have a little bit of room for thicker things to scan. Scan it. Easiest way to get something truly two-dimensional. Okay, what else do they want to see when looking at your work? They want to see focused, well-cropped images. The art should all be in focus with details easily seen. Blurry images are not going to impress anyone. Now, for some mediums, especially mediums that involve little itty bitty teeny tiny pieces, and I speak to this one personally, it's easier said than done, but overall you should aim for an image where as much as possible is in sharp focus. So if some of it's a little bit blurry, that's okay, as long as it doesn't distort the overall clarity of the piece. Great example is some of the scarves I make. I make beaded scarves. So I take these little tiny size 15 beads and I make full scarves out of them. But I have to be able to show that they're beads because from a distance they look like cloth. So there's my dilemma, because my macro lens does a great job, but the moment things go back further even slightly, it starts getting a little bit blurry. So as long as, for the most part, it's in focus, that's fine. And sometimes, you have to play a few tricks with the camera to get it right, but that is something, it's super important to make sure that things are in focus. Detail views, they're okay sometimes. Use them sparingly and only when it has the most effect. That would, again, I'll use my beadwork as an example. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll have an up close so you can see the pattern very close. So you have the whole piece, but then I'll show a detail view of it. Some applications, I don't think Zap allows for detail views, but Entry Thingy will. It depends on the application software that you submit to. But I will say that if the opportunity is there, only take it if you absolutely have to. If you don't have to, don't take it. That's not going to make them, not going to impress the jury. As far as cropping goes, you want all of the art there. There are very, very few exceptions like detail views with that you can crop things out. Another exception is if you have a necklace, the most of the chain is standard and you want to show just the most important part of it, that's fine. If you have a handbag and the strap is pretty much, if you can't artfully place the strap somewhere, it's okay to crop the strap a little bit. But those are the very few exceptions. For the most part, you want it all there. And you also want to make sure you add some breathing room around the edges of the work. You don't want to crop the photo in so tight that there's no space along the margins. It's a very claustrophobic and uncomfortable feel. And there's another reason that I'll cover later on for why you really want to make sure you've got a little bit of breathing room around your work. Here's an example. Why would you crop this photo this way? Why? Why would you cut off some of the beads? And then, oh, look, it's a detail view. That's completely out of focus. Don't do this, okay? By not having something in focus, by doing weird cropping, it's off-putting and the jury's not going to be impressed. The other bit is you want your work to be well lit and color balanced. You want your colors to be as close to true to life as possible, all right? That means that you don't want it to be too red, too blue, too neutral. You want it, the photo to reflect what the actual color of the piece is. When I take my photos, I will have the piece in front of me when I've got it open in Photoshop to make sure that I'm getting as close to that color as possible. You also want lighting. You don't want harsh shadows. Avoid blowout whites or super dense blacks. Sometimes people seem to think that, hey, I know, I'm gonna give this photo a cool feel by making the white super, super bright. And that doesn't help. We don't want mood lighting, okay? We want straightforward, here's the work. So here's would be an example of harsh shadows, super dense. This is something I actually did this to this photo, okay? Here's another idea of, ooh, let's blow it out and make it look dreamy and mystical. No, this is the original. Other than the fact there's a little bit of texture in this background, this is a really good photo because it shows the piece. The color of the wood, I'm convinced that this wood is actually this color, all right? They're not judging your Photoshop skills or your photography. They're judging your work. So your work needs to be represented as authentically as possible. What about Photoshop? Reality is, especially if you're taking your own photos, you're probably going to need to do a little bit of digital reproduction. If it makes you feel any better, professional photographers take their work into Photoshop, just like they used to take their work into the Lightroom and then dodge and burn to get the photo to where they want it to be. Photoshop is essentially the digital version of that. And it is important and it's a good tool to have. And not just Photoshop, but other photography programs. And I probably should have said this at the beginning. I have a handout that Toby will send out after this presentation. So if you're worried about note taking, you got it all right? And I'm including in it some live links to some additional resources. Don't fix your work too much in Photoshop. We'll know. I can tell if somebody has taken their stuff into Photoshop and improved it past a certain authentic line. It's, it's one of those things that it's the way I like to explain to people, think of Photoshop the same way your conservative grandma thinks of tasteful makeup. You should hardly know it's there. Avoid saving space by making your image too small. You can never take an image that you've shrinked. When you've shrunk an image, you can't go backwards. Once you save that image and it's that nice, small, tiny, under 1 megabyte size, that's its size. If you make it bigger, it's going to get blurry and weird and it's not going to work. So don't save space. If you have to, get yourself some thumb drives, buy some more cloud storage, create backups and archives. And then if you ever have to go to a higher size, you can go back into your archive, but don't shrink it too much because then you're going to regret it later on. And when in doubt, take a new photo. So if you've taken a photo of your work and it's not right, it's not good, and you're finding yourself spending forever in Photoshop trying to fix it, it's not worth it. Juries are going to question your authenticity if your images are fixed too much. And here I'm going to use myself as an example. Early days before 2017, I took this photo. Okay, it's not completely horrible, but it's really not great. Now, could I fix this even today? And keep in mind, I've got over 30 years of Photoshop experience, so I am very good in Photoshop. Could I fix this? Maybe. There's some things I can fix. There are other things I would have to completely redraw, repaint, totally replicate. Got to get rid of that background. It's just not a great photo. And then later I decided to go through my old stock and I decided to retake my images. And I'm glad that I did because the source material was so much better. Both have had some Photoshop work. The second one has had more because I've done a lot to basically get the background, smooth it out. 90% of the time spent was on the background and almost none spent on the work itself. And that's the way it should be. If you're going to spend a lot of time, make sure the bulk of it is cleaning up your background and not on your work. Because if the photo of the work itself isn't good, it's probably not something worth saving. All right, what should be in your photo? Your art. That's it. Just your art. Nothing else. Okay. You really need to just focus on that. And this is an area that I think jewelers kind of struggle with the most, especially jewelers who are not as used to being into some of the higher end shows. They think, let's add props. I'm inspired by this seashore, so I'm going to put a seashell on my earring, or my earrings on a seashell. No, don't. Only if it's not a part of your art, it shouldn't be in the photo. And that includes, and this I have all seen, logs, leaves, barks, dolls, toys, bread, or food of any kind, and anything else that isn't your artwork. It should not be in the photo. Now, what about model stands and holders? Reality is there are some types of work that just have to be on something. Any kind of, most fiber art, most wearable fiber art, if you have it out flat with a few exceptions, it just doesn't read as well. There are other pieces, like I know Julie does rings. It's hard to take a good photo of a ring that's just laying there. Having it on a holder is going to make a big difference. Earrings. Again, it's very hard to take a good photo of an earring just laying there. Certain things, they may just need to be held upright somehow. So here's the rule of thumb. The first thing you should see in the photo is your work. So if there's a stand that's required, then have the stand there, but you need to figure out how to make that stand melt in the background. Here's an example. The thing for sale here is the purse. Why is the person there? Is she necessary? I mean, no, she's not. She's, having somebody there holding the purse is not even really necessary. It's good that she's cropped off, she's unidentifiable, but for the most part, she's completely unnecessary. Here's an example, and this is a photo I took from the American Craft Council. This person is obviously, you really aren't going to have a hard time seeing what this is without having the model there. But what this person did, I can't tell if it's a model or a mannequin, and that's a good thing. But either way, they're completely in black. They're totally melting into the background. And all you really see is the beautiful fabric. And that's how it should be. So that's something that when you're thinking about, okay, I'd like to have some sort of model or stand, if you can make it disappear and if it's necessary, it's fine. But for the most part, avoid it if you can. The other thing is no watermarks. I know some people really like to put watermark on their jewelry. They want to make sure that everything, not just jewelry, but watermark on their work where they have their logo on there. I understand why, and especially in an age where there are people out there who will cruise the internet for handmade goods and then steal the idea. You're going to have to trust your jury to some degree that they're not going to steal anything. So no watermarks, especially if it's a blind jury, could actually get you disqualified. So just don't even do it. And no collages. This is another thing that I've seen happen a few times. Some people want to they figure I have a better chance if I show more. So what they do is they send in a single image, but in that single image, it's like 10 images of their work. Don't do that. It's not a good thing, because for one thing, the juries know what you're trying to do. They're not stupid. They know you're trying to get more than what's allowed in front of them, and more is not necessarily better. And the other thing is that they can't focus on the one thing. So you're actually taking away from yourself by trying to cram things in with a collage. Now, if you have something that's, say, a set, or you have something that is you know, it's a series that clearly goes together. Like, let's say you paint a triptych. Okay, you can do that. Have the triptych in there. That makes sense. Those three pieces are actually a single unit. They go together. Having them in one image makes perfect sense. But don't say, okay, you know, like let's say you have a woodworker who says, well, I'm going to show a spoon, I'm going to show a vase, I'm going to show, you know, 5 different otherwise unrelated items other than the fact that I made them all. That's not going to impress anyone, and it may actually disqualify you. And that's just, and the other thing is consistency is absolutely king. Jurors want to see a consistent body of work. Everything about your photos should look like it came from the same person. So keep your backgrounds consistent. It's a simple thing, but if you do that, you keep your backgrounds consistent, you keep your angles or view as consistent as reasonable, as long as when you look at all of your images together and you go, yes, this looks like this all came from the same place, then you're doing a good job. You don't want it to look like it came from 18 different places. And that also says the same for when you jury into a show. You want to make sure that what you're showing, your body of work, is consistent. So you may have a line of, say, line A versus line B. You may not want to mix up line A's and B's. Pick the one that's most representative of you and go with that same thing, so that when they look at it, say, this person has a voice. This person is consistent. So when you show up to that show, they're confident that they know who they've entered in. Best piece of advice I was given by Haverford's vice president of standards was, show the jury your best work, not your best selling work. That's an important thing to remember, is that some of your best stuff may not sell the quickest, but it's still your best quality work. That's what you want to put forward to the jury. Make sense, Paula?
Let me unmute myself here, and it does, with a few exceptions. But since you've let me in, I'm going to say, first of all, the PGC does like to see, when you're applying for a fine craft fair with the Pennsylvania Guild and you're a 2D artist, when you're applying for Chase, where we'll accept that, they do want to see your art framed. They want to see 2D art framed and matted, because of being a fine craft and art. We do like to see that, because we want to make sure that our artists are bringing framed and matted work, not just copies of their work, not just bins of copies. So we do want to see that. That is a difference. And also, jurors want to accept artisans, I should say, for PGC juries, which I've been on a bunch of them, another fun thing to do. And I am going to jury a small local craft show in Boiling Springs this year, which means that even though it will probably be rolling and it will be blind, I know you cannot have a blind jury with me on it, because I know everybody's work. But
there's always that.
Jurors want to accept artisans to the show who will be successful. So if someone is not accepted to a fine craft fair, it may be that we know that their work just isn't, it's not going to do it there. Why would we take their $600 or whatever, and then they're not going to be successful? So that's an important thing too, for people to just consider. Sometimes you don't get accepted into a show, and it's a good thing for you, because the jury knows what that show is about. Consistency is a terrific point. Woodturners and jewelers are the worst with consistency, I think. And it's good. They want to show us every trick they know, which is great, but you need to know, again, the jury wants to know, if I'm looking at a jeweler's work, I want to know, are they in competition with you, or are they in competition with Julie, or are they in, we need to be able to see that stuff. We don't want department stores, we want boutiques, is the basic way to look at that. So that's a really important consideration. And with respect to showing your best work, not your best sellers, you have to be careful there, because if you show all rings that are, say your Regina Marie Designs. Regina Marie Designs is a master artisan, and she's exhibited at a whole bunch of our shows, And she does a lot of things with fine silver and or sterling silver, and she carves a lot into the work. She textures a lot. So you show only 5 textured pieces that have large cabochon semi-precious stones. Then she comes and she's got a lot of little hammered earrings. I'm like, well, that's not what you showed me. So that would be in violation of, so you want to make sure that what you're showing the jury is a representative sample of what you're bringing. Don't bring your butter spreader if you're turning bowls like Toby, but make sure that you show a range of the line. I would say that's true, but no, nobody wants to see 6 different coffee mugs. Nobody wants to see 6 different cuff bracelets. Yeah, you're right. So.
Yeah, and I think that's thank you for expanding on that, because I think that is a good point. It's like, yeah, you do need to show range, and you do need to show, basically show what you're going to show, your best bits of your display. So you don't want to be again, it goes back to being authentic. You don't want to surprise anyone when you get there. Now, an example, I'll use myself as an example. I make a ton of earrings. My earrings are my bread and butter, and my beaded earrings are pretty intricate, and I do a lot of I have a fun line of earrings that are more like character and shape, and just I make Christmas trees that have actual ornaments on them out of tiny beads. But I'm not going to jury that. I will show other beaded work, and the Christmas trees will fit in with that. But it's not I'm not going to lead with that, because my best work are my scarves, my bigger pieces. So I think that's this kind of thing it's a funky balance that you have to strike, but really think about it. Don't just say, okay, I finished 5 things, let me just take photos and send them into the jury. Really think about what it is that what foot you're putting forward.
Let me give you the worst case example that this really happened. Several years ago at Rittenhouse Square, at one of our fine craft shows, there was a jeweler who had submitted the most amazing, breathtaking work. We had never seen this person before, and everybody in the jury was just gobsmacked. It was large. It was it had a flavor of maybe Inuit. It was very tribal and very cool. And they showed these large pieces, and we just couldn't wait, because we knew, and we gave them a key spot. They showed up. They had none of that with them. They had laid out basically on coffee tables 3 big ring cases of nothing but little, $50 tchotchke rings. And it was like, we made all these. I don't care if you made all those. That's not who we accepted into that. And the Fine Craft Fair manager said, we got to shut these people down. And we had to. And that's a horrible thing. Oh my God, that's a horrible thing to have to do. So that's the extreme. But yeah, you're not going to get dinged if you don't, oh my goodness, you have earrings and you didn't, you have tchotchke earrings and you didn't show us tchotchke. Everybody expects that. But it's that glaring stuff. And
and you better show the same quality that you jury into with.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just,
yes.
you gotta have that represented in the booth, along with your more bread and butter stuff.
And there again,
if you keep it in balance.
If you pay a lot of money to get into a Center City, Philadelphia event, and you bring junk, you're not going to make your booth fee.
No,
so
really
again, it doesn't help the artist. We got to work together.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. So you all ready to react? So here's how this is going to work. I'm going to show an image. All right. And I think there's only like 13 people. So if you want to shout out, I'm totally fine with that. But you can also hold up your little piece of paper. So I'm going to show you an image, and then you have to say, yes, this is a photo that should be shown to the jury. The question mark is yes with improvement. So in other words, this is a photo that can be saved. And then the last one is a no, no, just new photo, new approach, just don't do it. Okay. If you're feeling really salty, I won't be offended if you add a hell no to that. So there we go. This is the fun bit. Okay. Yes, maybe, or no?
Oh, no.
Oh.
No. Log. Why? Why do you have a log?
And out of
Filter
focus.
on the
Oh, my
log.
goodness.
Yeah, it's out of focus. It's also because I blew it up a little bit, but yes,
Yeah.
out of focus on a log. No, just new photo. Okay, ready? What do y'all think?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. For many, this is a hell no. Okay, here's
Yeah,
why. First off, what are we selling? Are we selling the child?
Yeah.
that's a fear.
Are we selling the photography? Because there's a watermark on that. And I can tell you that from the source that I took this from, the thing they're selling is the skirt. That's it. Not the headband, not the fairy wings, not the photography, not the child, the skirt. So this is a hell no. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What do we say? Yes, no, maybe. What do you think?
Needs improvement.
Yeah,
It looks out of focus to me.
Yeah,
there's
It's
something
a little out of,
at the top.
yeah, this could be saved. It's a little out of focus. The background needs to be cleaned up. Now you can fix focus a little bit in Photoshop. It would be possible. It would probably take less time to just retake the photo. However, this is not the end of the world. This is something that in a pinch you could fix this. He's got most of the basics right, but why would you leave that corner there? I don't understand. Okay.
Oh,
Yes,
no.
no, hell no. Right. For so many reasons. Okay. There's obviously we know what they're selling, I think.
Do we?
This is one of those pieces that yes, it does need to be modeled. However, it should be modeled on a bust, not on a real bust. And it's, no, just don't do this. Okay. This is just bad. Just don't. All right. Yes, no, maybe.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I go back and forth on this one. If somebody
Sure.
were to submit this to one of our juries, I know my vice president of standards would not completely flip out. There are some things I can see about it that could be fixed. There are some things about it that are okay. So this is borderline. This is in between please fix and good to go.
This does not get skipped over by a PGC jury. There are some things that,
No.
like the other ones, are dismissed out of hand, but this one, and we would hope that the other 4 images would be better.
I would,
Yes.
I would
yes.
fix those little highlight reflections in there.
Yes. There's like little things that could be fixed. There's like a smudge, some schmutz here that could, or sorry, you can't
Yeah.
see me move my mouse. There's some
I do.
schmutz that
Yes,
could
you
be
can.
fixed. There's some stuff that can be dealt with, but it's actually not a bad photo. I would say there's room for improvement, but again, if this were to actually make it through to the jury, it wouldn't be skipped.
There's a case where you might be better off if you had a stand and showed
Yeah.
that piece standing up.
Yeah, and you could very easily show a stand that would disappear.
Mhm.
Okay, yes, no, maybe.
Yes, good reflection. That black plexiglass is a good trick.
Yes, this is a really nice photo. This actually comes from the American Craft Council, so they clearly know what they're doing. And before I had mentioned avoid mood lighting, but this is an instance where the dark actually helps because it's a lit piece. So this makes sense. So this is a good one. Yes, no, maybe.
I think that's a yes, even though some people would argue that they should crop out the face of the person. It's a very nondescript age, and it's not a bad shot to me. I don't think you could crop out the entire face without sacrificing the line of the shoulder of the piece. So I like that piece. I like that image.
Me too.
And
I do.
the key thing here is that the model is there, she's there, but you're really looking at the work.
Yeah.
And you're right. If you were to crop this too much, you're going to get rid of your necessary breathing room. So it's the kind of thing that, yeah, it's the use of a model, but this is a good way to use a model where really you're focused on the work. You're not focused on her. Okay. Yes, no, maybe.
Oh my God.
No, I see a couple hands pitching. No, no, It's a cool piece, but dear Lord, background, unnecessary model. It's not, you really have a hard time seeing the work. It's just blending in, and it's not really the focus of the photo. Catalog shot, yeah, this would be good for a catalog, good for a website. For a jury photo, no, this would not fly. Okay. Oops, did I skip it? All right. I think, all right, so I did, there was a section. Okay, I don't know why, but all right. So I don't know why, but one of my slides disappeared, but I will quickly say, when it comes to the graphic designer, actually, let me see if I can get back there. Oops, sorry about that.
You're just doing this little technical difficulty thing to make the Luddites in the group feel better. I appreciate it.
Oh, you know what? I said put the graphic design stuff after the booth photo. That's my bad. All right. Sorry. I will get back to where we were. The good news is I know how to get back there. All right. So next we're going to talk about your booth. Okay. Couple things about booth photos. And this has been my current pain point. If they ask for a booth photo, give them a booth photo. I can't tell you the number of times that, you go to, go through the applications. Now, I'm not on the jury. I handle for the Haverford Guild, I handle like all of the details, but there are times that the vice president of standards and I will have to make a call on something. And I can't tell you the number of times we said we require a booth photo, and yet people will send in applications without booth photos. So first rule, send in a booth photo. It is much better to have an okay display than no display at all. Because one of the things, and I'm sure Paula will agree with this, but we're looking for professionalism. And if you can't get the application right, then there's a problem with professionalism. A booth photo can tip the scales between getting into an event or not, and no photo may get you automatically disqualified. So it's one of those things, even if you've never applied to a show before, still create a display. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. No people, all right? We don't want to see customers. We don't want to see you. No selfies, no glamour shots. True story, I was at a show and my person across the street from me was setting up her booth. And I'm like, okay. And then at one point I looked and she's on the ground. I'm like, oh crap, did something happen? Turns out she was posing in front of her booth for like glamour shots. And she had a photographer there and spent a good 20 minutes taking glamour shots in front of her photo. And the one thing I could think of, and this is before I started helping Haverford Guild out with their shows, was, dear God, I hope that's not her booth photo. Because I don't want to see you Vogue in front of your booth. I'm sorry. It's just not, I'm just not interested. So while that's a nice booth, and I'm sure a very lovely person, this is not what I want to see for a booth photo. I don't want to see you. I just want to see your booth. I don't want to see customers. I want to see your booth. Okay. So no people. If there's people in your booth shot.
Although that booth with the customers in it, let's just talk about that for a second, because otherwise that shows a jury something that they really love. Those are expensive and sturdy booth panels, and that is a professional tent. So that's,
and we're gonna kind of get into display options and things like that too. But yeah, you're right. It's a nice, if the people were not there, I think that would be, if people and signage were not there, I think that would be a great shot.
yeah.
But the problem, and because it's clear, it's brightly lit. I mean, both photos do a lot right, but by having that person there, it makes it wrong. Rule number 3, no signage or extra stuff. So that's, if you have, again, if you're working with a blind jury, even if they know who you are, don't put your sign in it or blur it out. you can, digitally remove your, you have no way, if that is your only option. And no credit card signs, cash boxes, awards, none of that. Okay. You're really showing your ideal booth. You're not necessarily showing 100% match. It should be like 80%, but take out the signage, take out the tags, blur out your name, logo. And, so like if you're a jeweler and you have hanging images of your work, or if you work with small scale stuff, you've got two options. You can either put a white poster, all white, where you would normally hang it, and then you can superimpose a photo in Photoshop of your work on those white posters. Or you can have a set made that does not have your logo or your name in it. And then that way, both are low post-production time, but that is going to make things a little bit better, because you don't want to have your name and logo for a blind jury. I put this up, it's a professional display, but there's all those little tags. If you take those tags out, this would be a great photo. And in this one, she's got the lovely welcome sign in chalk on the bottom. She's got all the signage up. It's not a bad display, although the tablecloths are a little wrinkled, but really this would not make a good booth shot.
No, the other thing about this is where are the tent weights? Because that's the other thing that jurors want to see whenever you're doing an outdoor show. They want to see you have weights.
Yeah, weights, especially if you're on asphalt. Some people will stake at some shows, but yeah, you definitely need to show that when you have your display, everything is properly tied down, because there's nothing worse than seeing the aftermath of, a sudden windstorm. And especially when you're in a show, you can do a lot of damage to your neighbors as well as to yourself. So it's very selfish to not properly weight your tent. That's a whole topic all by itself. Somebody asked me like, well, when do you put your weights out? I said, when there's a 50% chance of an ant farting. That's when I
There
put
you
my
go.
weight out.
Always, yeah.
Show as much of your booth as possible. All right. So to do that, you want to eliminate background. So you want booth walls. All right. You do not want a booth shot with open sides, because we don't want to see your background. And don't only show the best bits. A booth shot is not a close-up of your table. All right. A booth shot is the whole booth as much as possible. Jurors want to see consistency in the work. They want to see as much there as possible. They don't want to see just a table, and keep it authentic. So your booth should be pretty much what it is that you're going to set up. All right. It's not going to be 100%, because obviously you're going to have signs, you're going to have all of the stuff that you need to have to actually do a show, but you definitely want to make sure that you have pretty authentic. So here's an example. This is a bad booth shot, because we have a hard time seeing what the setup is, because we see everything around it. And then this is not a booth shot. It's a nice display, but it's not a booth shot. Okay, all the art in the booth should be consistent. This goes back to when you jury the photos, you want them to be consistent. You want everything in your booth to be consistent. You also want to show your best work, not necessarily your best sellers. So yeah, have some of your best sellers in there, but still, again, just like the jury photos, if you're going to do big, amazing pieces, have big, amazing pieces in your booth shot, because that's what they're selling. And then the other thing is edit. A lot of people, especially when they first start out, they put way too much inside of their booth. They cram it packed. They think if it's out, it's for sale, I'm going to sell so much. But the reality is that if you put too much in there, you're not going to see anything. And your customers aren't going to see anything. So don't be afraid to edit. It's better to have to need to pull things out than it is to try and, get somebody to actually see something. Here's another example of, this is nice work, but there's so much there. It's overwhelming. So don't be afraid to edit. All right, keep it clean, and the displays should all be cohesive. You want your displays to look as professional as possible. So you want them lint-free, smudge-free, wrinkle-free. So if you use tablecloths, make sure they're ironed. It's like, it's the little things. And I know if you're in the middle of the field and there's no electricity nearby, you don't have to have an iron. You can get wrinkle release. And like, there's a spray that you can use that can help the wrinkles out. And by the time the show opens up, hardly anyone's going to notice. But especially for your booth shot, you know, why put on wrinkle? Why show the jury that, look, I have wrinkled tablecloths? Don't do it.
You should unless you absolutely have to, you should not be doing booth shots at shows.
Yeah, we're going to get there.
That's think about it, in the field with the wrinkles and the neighbors and the people.
Right. Well, and the other thing is, you know, avoid extra character. I know some people, unless you're doing a Ren Fest where it's as much a performance as it is a show, don't do tons of extra stuff to your booth to give it that character. This is a good example.
Ooh,
it's
wow.
clean, it's professional, you can see the work in the booth. And so a jury would look at this and look at the photos and go, okay, this is a person that I'm confident that when they show up, they're going to look professional. They're going to look like they belong there. All right, so recommendations. My first one is take a fresh set of booth shots every year. Your displays are going to change. You're going to grow as an artist, and you're not just going to grow as an artist, but you're also going to grow in how you display your work. Try different angles, booth sizes, and configurations. If you know you're going to be outside and you've got the bandwidth for it, take an outdoor shot. But also, if you can, do an indoor booth shot. And so if you know you're going to do an indoor show, present an indoor booth shot. Avoid taking booth shots at a show. I know this one is really hard. I have no trouble setting up a booth in my yard. And outdoor is easy. For me, indoor, I have to juggle through all kinds of things in order to get a good indoor shot. So I will admit there have been a few times I have taken a booth shot at an indoor show, but here's the circumstances which I will do it. If my setup is the day before and I have all the time in the world, I'll set up the booth. I won't put up any signage. I'll take some photos, and then I make sure I leave enough space so that I can get to the back of my booth and I can hang my banner. That is the circumstance which I'll do an indoor shot where I'm not rushed. I will never take an official booth shot at a show where I'm setting up that morning, because there's just isn't enough time. I don't do anyone any favors that way. I'll annoy the hell out of my neighbors. It's not worth it. So don't do it. But if you have to, that's a good circumstance, especially if it's setup day is the day before. Warning about do-it-yourself solutions. Paula mentioned this a little bit earlier about, oh, look, this person has professional panels. I get it. I'm coming from a place where I've worked my way up from doing church bazaars, and now I'm moving more into some of the higher end shows. And I get it. Getting all your display stuff together, it is a serious investment and it can take some time. And I'm a big fan of do-it-yourself kinds of stuff sometimes, because not only can I save money, but I can be a little bit more unique, but there is a danger there. DIY displays can really set your booth apart and be friendly to your budget, but they can also really, really backfire. They should never look like a last-minute act of desperation. Never. If you're creating a display at the last minute because you are desperate, then you're doing it wrong. Don't do it. And all of your DIY stuff has to work well and fit in with your other professional display items. When you step back, or better yet, when a stranger steps back and looks at your booth, they should have a hard time picking out the stuff that you made yourself versus the stuff that you bought. So invest very carefully. And before you put in all that time and effort, because I can tell you for every DIY solution, what you save in cash, you spend in time and sweat equity. Crunched all.
Gotta add that in whenever you're pricing your work.
Exactly. It's the same thing, and sometimes you'll find that your DIY solution is actually more expensive than if you were going to go out and buy it yourself. I have a great example of that for myself. When I first started doing indoor shows, the first show I did, I used my tent for booth walls, which is perfectly reasonable. A lot of people do it. But then I thought, well, you know what? It's a lot to haul. I hate taking my top on and off again. I just wasn't a fan. So I thought, I know I'm going to be brilliant and I'm going to figure out how to build my own booth walls. And I did research and I figured out a solution that I'm pretty confident would have worked. Then when I did the math, it turns out that my DIY solution would have cost me nearly twice as much as me just going to a very good website and purchasing my own set of pipe and drape. So I just went ahead and purchased my own set of pipe and drape, and I'm so glad that I did. So think very, very carefully before you do a DIY. Here's a bad example.
Oh,
Yeah, I knew that.
oh.
Cringe. Yeah, okay, so not only did she steal her grandmother's tray table and possibly her grandmother's suitcase, she's got cardboard things for her necklaces. It's the shelf looks like she put it together somewhere. I'm not sure where. It's not great. She probably saved a whole lot of money on the display, and unfortunately, it looks like it. So don't do this, okay? But here's another solution. Somebody found these really cool shutters, sanded them down, painted them, took out a level, and then added some boards that matched. A lot of sweat equity into this, but this looks really cool. This is a nice way to get the most out of your vertical space in a jewelry booth. And I think that this is a great solution. Cost a lot of sweat, but it's a nice DIY. So I'm not saying never do DIY, but I am saying that if you choose to create your own display, think very carefully about it and plan and research, because a bad DIY display can backfire in such a terrible way. So that's just something that I figured I'd put out there. At one point, there was an individual we did have to reject for a show because the display was so bad that we didn't want them in the show because it just was completely unprofessional.
That's one of the things that the PGC tries to do whenever we're jurying and we see somebody whose work is really good, but their booth is just not quite there. We'll reach out to them and try to help them. You know, it's like, especially with folks who, and I think that's an important value added thing that you need to know about when you apply for a show, a PGC fine craft fair. You do, those things do happen. So we do try to make, you know, yeah.
So here's what I'm going to recommend. Brainstorm, visit and walk shows where you're not as a participating artist for booth ideas. Great way to get ideas. Go in person and walk shows and go, yeah, okay, I can see me doing that. Cruise Pinterest. You know, I'm always looking at jewelry displays. I'm always looking for new ideas. I may not look like every other jeweler on the block, but that's okay. I still get some really good ideas. Ask for ideas from artists' Facebook groups. There's some good ones out there that, you know, every now and again you can say, hey, here's what I'm looking to do. Here are my restrictions, any ideas? And you'll often find at least a couple other people who have similar situation and have found good solutions. Talk to the guild. I know a few people. So never be afraid to reach out and ask for help. Especially you've got the PA Guild as a resource, use it. When and where to take photos. Okay, so if you're going to do an outdoor display, outside, overcast, partly cloudy days are the best, especially with low wind. Reason for that, you're going to avoid harsh shadows, and those shadows can kill you. It's fixing a photo with harsh shadows is rough, so just don't. Inside on your own property, when you don't have to be rushed, if you have a large property or a garage or something like a large big house, that's a good place to take it. You can borrow a space from a friendly church, a rec center, friends with big houses. For both, use booth walls. And avoid doing it just before a show unless you don't have to. I know I covered that, but it's worth saying again. And remember that developing a strong booth display takes time and a healthy budget, so just do the best you can. I'm going to show you the evolution of my booth display. Now, full disclosure, I'm not there yet. I'm still improving. And I will be for the rest of my career because that's just how that goes. But I just wanted to show this just to kind of give you an idea of how it can change over time and exactly why you need to take photos every year. 2015 is when I first got started. This was my first my first effort. I was proud of the fact that I even had tablecloths. Okay. Also, not all of these were meant for jury photos. So just so you know, that's why some have signage and some don't. 2016 got a little bit better, but you can see, big problem. I don't have the right kind of tent. My tent has slant leg. I didn't know better, but hey, you know, eventually I learned. 2017, okay, starting to get a little bit better. You can see I do have some DIY. Then I've got my first multiple day indoor show. I bombed at the show, but hey, you know, at least my booth was halfway decent. All right, now I have a new tent, and this is the right kind of tent, and I'm really glad that I've got it. It made a big difference in terms of how much space I had to work with. This was my first attempt at a booth shot. You know, I actually have even more DIY introduced into this, and I'm not even going to tell you what it is. Can anybody quickly figure out where my DIY solutions are?
I think you have
I
some
don't know what's under that
fireplace
tablecloth.
grates or something.
Yep, those are fireplace grates. Jess, what are you going to say?
Oh,
I was
yeah,
gonna
that's
say,
what's
I
on
don't know
purpose.
what's under the, what's under that tablecloth, but I'm wondering if that's a knockdown.
Those are gift boxes from the
Mhm.
Container Store. So they pack flat.
Mhm.
Can anybody else spot the DIY?
Is that an easel that you have some screening and then all your earrings on?
Very good. That is actually a trade show display. So I bought just the hardware, and then I used screen door material in order to hang the earrings. So hey, look, could it be better? Sure, but it's not bad. And at the time, a lot of people really liked it. 2019, now I have booth curtains, sorry, pipe and drape.
Very
So I
nice.
went from using a tent to pipe and drape. And 2020, I had to completely rethink my booth display because I had one show that year and social distancing was important. So I did everything I could to maximize space. I liked some of the changes, so I decided to keep the shelves and only brought one table back. And then later this year, I was able to eliminate the table, but I was able to repurpose the tablecloths. So
I like that I didn't see any ankles on any of your tables when you were using them. That's a very important thing.
yes, you want your tablecloths to be hit the ground. And even if you do a standard size tablecloth, what I used to do is I would duct tape the one end to the back of the table, the part you would never see, so that it would reach the whole way down. And then what I would do is I would just secure the legs to make sure that they weren't going to, you know, trip anyone.
Yeah.
But
Good
that just
idea.
gives you an idea that yes, over time your booth is going to evolve and improve. And mine isn't done yet. I'm still getting there. So what is the graphic designer looking for? This one's quick. Everything the jury is looking for. Okay, all the elements that a good juried photo gives. It's also what the graphic designer is looking for. But your image has to be big enough. Your background needs to be clean, and you need room to breathe. And this is exactly what I mean by it. The image is already centered. I don't have to fix it. I could put this image on the edge of a page because there's enough room to breathe that I can actually take this and bleed off the edge. And if there's enough space there that I can still crop in if I need to, but I don't have to, I'm not forced to. So when it comes time, like you get past the jury and then the show coordinator hands the photos over to the graphic designer for the advertising, says, you can pick from these 5. This is what I'm looking at. Okay, taking your own photos, even if your craft is not photography. I'm sorry if this is running long, guys. Okay, plain, simple, clean backgrounds. Don't get fancy. That is not going to help you. No props, no supers. So don't go super dark, super light, super red, yellow, green. You want your photo to be balanced. For 3-dimensional art, make sure there's breathing room around the photo. For equipment, at a bare level, you're going to want a camera with a timer and a tripod. Because we're humans, we're always moving. If you're holding the camera when you're taking the photo, and I don't care what kind of camera it is, it's going to get a little fuzzy. By putting it on a timer and placing it on a tripod, what you do is you hit the button and you take a step back, and then that camera is going to be still. There's going to be no shake. You're going to need a light booth for work that's big enough to, so if your work is small enough that it can fit on a table, you can get a light booth. They come in all kinds of sizes. Light box kits, light booth, they range on Amazon, but starting around $25, and they can go all the way up to $200. I actually have what you see on screen here. I have pretty much almost this exact same kit, and I think it cost me $40, and the lights are inside the box already. So it's a good starter kit, especially if your work is smaller. If your work is too big to fit on a table, then you're going to want a clean, non-wrinkled backdrop. That can be a sheet that's ironed. No wrinkles. Just remember, burn that into your brain. No wrinkles. You can buy professional photographers backdrops. They will be more expensive, but if you're just starting out and you're just learning, good place to start. Iron a sheet. That'll work. And lights. If you think you have enough light, buy more. You're going to want at least 2 sources so they can cancel each other's shadows out as much as possible. And you want color balanced light. So it needs to be daylight. In Kelvin, that's 550 to 650 K. You can easily figure this out by going to your local hardware store, walk into the lighting section. It'll actually tell you what temperatures each light bulbs are. Your backgrounds matter. The color of your background is going to directly affect how your work appears in the photo. Now, everybody's work is going to be different and going to need different colors. But I will say, to start, try a photographic gray, which is somewhere between a 60 and 70% gray tone. If anybody's ever taken photography in college or taken a photography class, you'll hear something called a gray card. That's photographic gray. You could also do a mid-level neutral tan. Again, you're aiming for about that same middle ground. And if you're going to cut it out, so if you're going to digitally add your background, let's say you want a gradient, you should aim for the middle tone of that gradient. That's what you're going to shoot your work on. Avoid reflective backgrounds. Unless you are well versed in photography, don't attempt the plexiglass trick until you've gotten a few good photos in without it first, because that can be tricky. So here's an example. 2 photos, same piece of jewelry, same camera, same light. The only difference in these photos, I didn't even do any Photoshop work to these. The only difference in the photos is the background. You can see that what I took on my board, my work board, is very reflective, and the light bounced right back into that camera and completely distorted the color. On the other hand, on the non-reflective gray surface, that's much truer to life, and that's without any color balance that I did in Photoshop. So, and that's why I say start with a gray first. If you may find that, you know what, my jewelry is silver and I do much better off of a much lighter gray or white, then do that. But at least know how the camera, because every camera reacts a little bit differently. So at least know what it is you're getting yourself into. Start with the gray and then adjust as necessary, but keep it clean, simple.
Your auto light balance is what's screwing that up a lot too, because it read that reflection as a bright spot. So everything else is too dark. You're underexposed in the picture where you have that reflection. Right. And that's what a lot of, when you're using a camera with auto, on auto and not selecting your own stops and things, that's what you run into. Yeah.
This was taken with my iPhone. So if you have your camera will also make a difference. An iPhone has very little in the way of control. There's only so much you can do with an iPhone. If you have like a DSLR camera, a good solid digital camera that you can swap lenses out on, I always get a better result with that camera than I do with my iPhone. I did this more for as a sample for background.
It's still better to have a non-reflective, you can overcome it some with a better tool, but why set yourself up for that? Yeah.
You want to start with good photography always starts with a good photo. There's no way around that. I can Photoshop the hell out of anything. Trust me. This is actually an example. Don't attempt a green screen. I'm sure some of you may have heard that. And that's when you take a picture on a ridiculous colored background, because then in Photoshop, you can just select that color and eliminate it and boom, you're done. That's a lot harder than it sounds. And here's why. This is a photo that I was given to do a book cover. And yes, this is the author in a house coat with somebody's borrowed child. All right. And the photographer thought they'd be smart and use a green screen, except it's a wrinkled green sheet. Here's the problem. They did not do the lighting correctly. And even professional photographers struggle with the green screen thing. You have to have that lighting perfect because there's something called spill. All right. Spill is when the color of the environment will actually bleed onto the object that you are taking the photo of. Spill is, and people who do metal jewelry, anything reflective, know this problem because it reflects everything. Well, we all get spill. We just don't notice it as much. I had to take him out and put him on a different background. So, all right, he's cut out. Now, if you look at the pink bunny slippers, you're going to see they're looking not so pink. That's spill. Also, they should have really lit his bottom half a lot better. That's another story. But yeah, so I had to go in and I had to take out the green and add the shadows back in. And then finally, I was able to put him in the background and it worked out. That's 30 years of Photoshop experience at work. And this was hard. So I would say when it comes to green screen, don't attempt it. You're not going to do yourself any favors. Avoid it. Just use a neutral background. Don't try to get too fancy with it because you're just going to find yourself frustrated. You know, now granted, I had to look at that man's legs way too long. Just saying. Okay, I do have, when I take photos of my jewelry that I need to process, here's my order of operations that almost always works. First, you're going to straighten and crop your image. Then you're going to adjust for color and brightness. And then after that, you're going to clean up your dust and your specks. Now, I will say this before I go too much further. This is the very, very simple version. Digital editing of your photos and cleaning them up in Photoshop or whatever photo editing software you choose to use, that is a presentation all by itself. And if there's something we want to do in the future, let me know. I'd be happy to present on it.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
It's definitely a much, much longer process than I'm describing here, but this at least gives you the overview. Save a version of the file. Always, always, always keep your original. If you have to go backwards, that's fine, but never get rid of your original. We'll talk about sizing in a bit, but that's your last step. Your last step is going to be resizing. All right, what about size? Pixels versus inches. Let's start there. Pixels are the size on the screen. Inches are the size on a piece of paper. Okay, so one's digital, one's in real life. Dots per inch or pixels per inch is PPI. So when somebody says save it out at 1 inch by 300 DPI, they're saying when you print it out, it needs to be an inch big, and we want 300 pixels or dots in that inch. So screen quality, 72 DPI is traditional. You may have also heard 96, but 72 is usually what people go by. 300 DPI is print quality. So when I'm doing a brochure or poster, anything that has to exist in the physical world, I'm doing 300 DPI. When I'm doing websites, I got to do 72. Megabytes is the size of the file. That's all about the amount of information that's saved in that file. Okay. Here's how the more megabytes in the file, the more information, and the bigger the larger the image is. And the physical and the pixel size of a file will vary. So megabytes is not a super accurate measurement. It can be a good benchmark, but it's not the most accurate way to measure. All right, so there we go. Okay, this is an inch at 72 DPI. So those circles all represent a pixel. 72 DPI, that's what we're looking at. That is the same inch at 300 DPI. You see the difference? One's got a whole lot more information than the other one. Oops. So, and that's where you can see the differences. All right. So what happens when they say, okay, I want this size file? Somebody says, I want if I want a image that's 6 inches wide by 300 DPI, there's a calculation that goes in there, but most of the time, you're going to go by pixels. That's going to be your most accurate measurement. Always pay attention to what sizes the application is asking for and resize the copy of your image to match. So Zap wants everything ideally to be 1900 pixels at its longest side. So if it's a vertical image, 1900 or 1900 pixels that way. If it's horizontal, 1900 pixels that way. Now, there's also some rule of thumb. So I mentioned that the megabyte size is going to vary a little bit, but it can be a quick way to see if your file is going to be large enough or not. So if your file is less than 500K when it's saved, it's probably too small. All right. If your file is between 500K and 1 megabyte, it's big enough for Facebook or any other social media and websites. So in other words, when a person looks on it, scrolling through the screen, they're going to be able to see enough of it that it should make sense to them. Because the computer doesn't care what the inches measurement is. The computer only cares what the pixel dimension is. If your file is over 1 megabyte, it's big enough to print even at a small size, and avoid submitting files with sizes greater than 5 megabytes. So what about Zap? Because that's our gold standard here, right? Your Zap image should be between the last two. It should be smaller than 5 megabytes, but bigger than 1. All right. And every program has a different way of telling you how big an image is. I can't go into detail with that because, you know, if you're going to use Photoshop, if you're going to use Affinity Designer, if you're going to use GIMP, they're all different ways. Basically, look at either under file properties or image size. It should give you the pixel dimensions. And that's really what you want to go by most of the time. What not to do. Do not shrink before editing. You want as much information at your disposal as possible. So don't shrink your file first. That's your last step. Do not write over your original. Always keep the originals. It's a good backup to have in case you're working on it, you really mess something up, you have to start over again because you learned something new. You don't ever want to lose that original. Don't exaggerate the color in your image. Stay as authentic as possible. Don't crop in too close. Leave that breathing room. Don't add artistic effects. For the love of God, we don't need a soft focus. We don't need it to look like it was drawn in pastels. You know, yes, the effects are kind of fun. No solar flares or lens flares. We don't need them. Just don't do that. But most of all, don't give up. Photography takes a lot of practice. Digital editing takes a lot of practice. I know it's not easy, but don't give up. And the more you do it, the more you'll learn, the better you'll get at it. And there we go. It was a lot of content. Toby, do we have time for questions?
I hope so.
Yes, go ahead.
I have a
think
question.
Go ahead, Eileen. I'm sorry. I'm stepping on people.
Oh, no. On the photo where you had your 2 necklaces.
Mm-hmm.
So did you do those? You didn't do those in your box, right? You did them
No.
out somewhere. I have difficulty because I do necklaces and I'm also earrings, and you know, is that considered, like what you did, is that called a flat lay? I'm not sure if that's the appropriate.
I don't know what it's called either.
Yeah, I have trouble because if I want to do a necklace and I do it in the box, you know, where the camera it can't see, it's only seeing it because, unless you hang it or something, you know what I mean?
There's, if you want to do an overhead shot of a necklace. Now, I actually just got a rig that it's a ring light, but it tilts so it can do a direct overhead shot, because I'm actually going to be playing around with creating a demonstration video. So it has a holder that holds my camera or phone. It holds the phone and then has a ring light that goes above. So it's directly lighting down, and there's a holder for the camera. Now, in a light box, depending on what kind of light box you have, some of them actually have a cutout at the top. You can lift the top off and you can arrange the camera so that it's looking directly down. Okay, so you can do that. Your other option is that you can take the light box and you can flip it so open end is up, so then you can arrange the camera so it's directly looking down. So you have to play with it a little bit. It's tricky. Overhead shots with a traditional tripod are really hard because you often need weights, because the camera's like, depending on your camera, like if you're using a phone versus a DSLR camera, things can very easily tip over. And I've gone as far as to experiment with ladders to get my overhead shots. So I would say go on Amazon and look up like ring light phones or things like that. You know, do a search. You'll see. Actually, I can be back very quickly.
While she's doing that, I will tell you that for people who have shiny objects, or people like me who make shiny objects and attach them to matte finish objects, and they're both in the art, the very best thing you can do is find someone who has fabulous pictures, ask where they got them, and pay a professional photographer to have your pictures taken. It is so worth it. You're spending so much opportunity cost learning. So I mean, Megan Horan has some beautiful images. There are several people who pack their things up, send them away, have the pictures taken. If you like taking pictures, that's great. But if it just frustrates you, job that out. So
Yeah.
And I would say,
Yes.
And I would say, yes, it's the same thing that I said with the DIY booth displays. You're going to spend sweat equity. You're not really saving money. What you're doing is you're using your resources. If you don't have the financial resources to send it out, then these tips will help you. But if you have the financial ability to send it out, first off, look at the photographer's portfolio. Make sure they understand what a jury photo is. You still need to know what that is. And you need
must be a product photographer. Yes, a product photographer, not your guy that does weddings. Yes.
Right. And the other thing is, now this is the rig I was talking about. So it's got the holder and then the light. And this is actually, the color temperature is adjustable on this. Check this out on Amazon. And you can always email me later. I'm sure Toby can send, you know, Toby's welcome to share my email. But yeah, you're right. Julie and Paula are exactly right. Especially if you have really difficult to shoot kinds of stuff. And if you have the financial ability, send it out to a professional. Even if it's like, this is going to be my jury set.
Right.
I photograph everything. I have a photo catalog of every piece I've ever made. So for me, I'm going to take the photo no matter what. But it's on my list that as soon as I can financially afford it, I do want a professional photographer to take my work, because I know that even though I'm pretty good, I can get away with a lot. I'm still not a professional photographer. End of the day. Does that help?
Right. And it's not just the photography, it's the staging, Eileen, which is what you were talking about. Really important. I mean, I've watched, I only go to a photographer. I am the worst photographer in the world, and I'm not going to learn how to do it. I don't need that many images to apply to shows. And I'll tell you, I've used Ralph Gabriner, who is I think, most famous jewelry photographer there is. The only reason why I got into some shows is because of his images, not necessarily.
Where is he located, Julie? Where is he from?
He's in New York.
Yeah, that's the person I've heard other jewelers talk about then, I'm sure.
Oh God, I live right next to it.
There's a couple people out there. I think I want to say,
And I have another one I can recommend that I've
Yeah.
used. A
Can I
product
ask,
photographer.
what format are you at, when you get images, are you asking for different sizes depending on what you're going to use them for?
No,
Or
because there's a
strictly-
per image charge. And
Okay.
usually I like at least 3 images of my work. But I ask for a Zap photo because I want it in Zap format because that's who everybody uses. And I want it in a square format so I can put it on my website. And I can always, I have Photoshop elements, very simple, and I can change the size. That's really all I ever do.
That's the
Right.
thing. If you get professional photographs and you ask for them to send you the largest file, the one with the most information, then you can resize and
Yeah.
that for your, for yourself. But I mean, if I were going to have a professional photographer shoot my work, I would want them to send me the most beautiful image in the biggest file that I could have. So if I did crop it, or if I did have to change it from 72 to 300, or if I wanted to put it on a poster, I could work with it. And I think that's,
make sure that too, like when you're talking to your photographer, make sure that they understand that, don't crop in too close, leave some of that breathing room. That's so important, because I can't tell you the number of times I get a photo and I want to use it, but there's no background. Like I have to either rebuild it, recreate, stretch, do something to the background, because I just can't take that. I don't have that 1/8 of an inch that I need to put something on the edge of a page.
yeah.
So you explain to the photographer, like, okay, I need a jury photo, especially if it's somebody that who isn't known. But explain to them, hey, and even if I had a friend of mine who does light painting, and he basically wanted to shoot some of my scarves because they were such an interesting texture and all that stuff. But the guy had never touched jewelry before. His daughter had to explain how to use the clasp. Okay. So he, so he took these absolutely gorgeous photos, and I couldn't use most of them to do any sort of jurying work, which I didn't complain about, by the way, because I was like, cool, dude, have fun learning how to shoot jewelry. Like, it was worth it. The photos were gorgeous, but they were really more catalog shots. They really weren't jury photo shots. So there is a difference. And that's why it's important for you to know what the jury's looking for, so that if you do use a professional photographer, you can explain it to them.
And ask somebody who has great shots. And you can tell a lot about how shots look if you just go back and look through the Facebook page for the PGC Fine Craft Fairs. You can see, you look through and you'll start to get a feel for what people find attractive. So I think that's a real important thing. If you see really great images of something that's in your particular medium, talk to the person. And nobody ever gets mad whenever they get a note from somebody that says, oh my God, your work looks terrific, who took the pictures? I mean,
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Paula, he lives in Mount Vernon.
I have one quick comment, and that is that I have done a presentation several times. Some of you people have seen it more than you want to, about effective booth design. And if you would like to have that, you can text me or email me rather, and I'll send that to you. My pictures are so much grosser than Christine's are of my booth. So,
Wow. I was really nervous, Paula, because I'm like, I know I'm not like super high end yet, but I'm working on.
you know what? No, it's great. You hit the right points. The main thing is you got the ankles covered, you got a tent that's professional, you have proper weights, and you follow the rules of the fine craft fairs that you're in. Those are really important things. So yes, if anybody's interested in seeing my ugly high school pictures, let me know. You did a great job, by the way, Christine. Fabulous.
Oh, thank you. And if it makes anyone feel better, when I first started selling at shows, long before I joined the PGC, I asked a woman who had been a professional artist for years. Actually, it was a couple of them in the same room. And I said, when do you have it figured? When do you have the booth down? Like, when do you know that you've got your setup and it's good? And they all just laughed at me and said, never. It just doesn't happen like that. So it's okay, even when you feel like, okay, I finally got into the shows I was trying to get into. It's okay to look at your booth and go, I could do better, because that shows that you're growing. So don't ever let that bother you.
Good point.
Anything else? Any other questions, comments?
You guys did
Okay,
a great job. Thank you.
Yes.
thank you.
Christine.
Thanks for letting me
Christine,
play
and
along.
thanks, Christine and Paula. And thanks for everybody who showed up.
No problem.
We'll have to do this again sometime and we can have coffee and cookies together.
Yeah, that'll be
Yes.
nice.
Yes,
All right. Bye, everyone. Have a good weekend.
you
All
too.
right.
Bye, all.
Everyone.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.